Hello and welcome. India is a great place for technology startups, and not just technology startups, but companies who are trying to work with technology startups to ensure that they inject that innovation factor or the X factor that they've been missing all these years. It's not an easy journey, but some have succeeded to some extent and some have not. Somewhere in this is the role of global capability centers or global captive centers, as they call, which is essentially the tethered organizations to motherships elsewhere in the world who try and serve very critical, increasingly critical functions. So how can this innovation system or the ecosystem work with these large corporations and their subsets in India or countries like India and create something really valuable for the companies and their customers? Joining me to talk about that is Akhilesh Tuteja, partner at KPMG, who also heads the technology practice. Thank you so much for joining us, Akhilesh.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
Right. So we're going to talk about global captives in a bit, but tell us about your thoughts on the innovation ecosystem and how do you see startups so far in their journey to work with large companies and the large companies wanting to work with startups, essentially to make up or to fill the gaps that they have in their own enterprises?
I think this is a great topic because it's been a journey for a long time. Large companies have spent enough money trying to innovate within. Some of them have said that they can create their own centers, incubate something, keep something at arm's length. But many have found working with startup as a relatively inexpensive experiment. Because in this case, you don't have to put in your capital, you don't have to create a conflicting two organizations within. So you say, okay, fine, I keep my big monolithic structure once and I get a startup to work with. Many of them have met with challenges because one is the speed with which the startups want to work and the sort of using the word bureaucracy or the governance which the large companies want to work, they sometimes don't marry, and that's been a challenge. GCC, in my view, is a very interesting potential sub-solution to that problem, because what GCCs allow, GCCs represent the large corporation, they represent the problem of the large corporation, but they also don't act like large corporations in that spirit. So they are also agile, little bit nimble,
and
have the ability, and they are away from the power center. So what people have tried to do is that can startups add value to the large corporation through this channel of a GCC or something? I think that's a great proposition, and it's worked well in some cases. But I would also say that it's not as easy because the companies which are also GCCs have some sort of challenging areas which startups find it hard to marry. To start with is this whole access to data, because any startup, they try to marry with a large company because not that they are making so much money, they co-create their solution, they sharpen their solution because they need data. And in this case, the large corporation isn't willing to share data because of the challenges about data governance and all that. So I think that's one big challenge. The second one is that even if the startup is willing to do and sometimes not asking for all those kind of things, the two organizations' way of working is fundamentally different. So I think I've seen some great successes when you are dealing with a problem which is not necessarily the core problem. So start with something which is.
Give us an example.
Yeah. So for example, one very interesting problem I've seen a startup solve is solving the recruitment challenge. Recruitment is not a big challenge for large companies, but it is the same case here for GCC. So typically in this particular case which I looked at, the acceptance ratio was 1:80, which means that you looked at 80 CVs and selected one. And here comes a startup which says that we will do a nice machine learning algo on doing classification of what are the right traits you're looking for and what are the right traits of the CV, and they reduce that effort by 1/4. Now that's a sub problem, it's not a core problem. But once you solve that problem, basically what you're doing, that you're telling that a machine can determine what's the success rate. So if a machine can determine the success rate of a CV, they can also determine the success rate of whether you will approve that particular business case or a loan or another kind of thing. So it can move from back office to front office once you build the confidence.
And the way you put it, it's interesting. So it's also a way to position a startup. A startup is typically looking to solve some giant problems. In this case, you're saying that maybe look at the Fortune 50 companies or Fortune 100 companies, see the 10 problems that they face and try and find a solution. And those 10 problems is not even the 10 top problems.
Absolutely. I think this is what I call the confidence building stage. Both startup and the large companies go through this and get it right. But you're right, at some stage you have to get and solving those big world hunger kind of problem. It takes time, but I think you do get there.
Right. So the other question is, as the whole the ecosystem of global capability centers has evolved in India, we're looking at a very large base now. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of people multiplied by the number of years they've spent in very, very sharp verticals, working at a global sort of level in terms of skills, knowledge, capabilities. So what is all this? Equals to today? and where can this go, and what do we need to do to make sure that it goes there?
Absolutely. I think we are at a very fortunate situation, because thanks to the large corporations setting up their centers here, we've been able to achieve two things. One is we've been able to upskill our capabilities, because we are now dealing with those problems which are those big corporation problems. And second is that we have been able to do some of these things at a very early age. So I'll give you an example. If somebody who is working in the large corporation, let's say hypothetically speaking for a large bank, somebody will have maybe 15, 18 years of experience before they touch some of those issues. But because in India they are doing a little bit of, I won't say the second fiddle, but kind of supporting the big cause, you will typically end up doing that 10 years earlier in your career than you will do it in a large corporation. So you're doing great capabilities and doing it sooner. Now, in my view, this is helping us in two ways. One is that we are able to serve the large market, which means that it allows India to earn export dollars, it allows you to have great economical growth, quality of jobs and all that. That's one part which is direct. I think there's also an indirect benefit that this population, which is now upskilled, highly skilled, can actually drive the domestic digital transformation journey. So if you look at it today, if we were to do the Flipkart or a Paytm or others to happen, I think we are in a much better shape, because we are having a large mass of people who dealt with that problem. They can either be a great builder or a user. I think both are great indirect benefits.
Right, and if you expand that, let's say we also have government, and government also can get more technologically savvy.
Absolutely.
And there are so many parts of the system or the country which can and the citizens' interaction with it. So where do you see other opportunities for the skills that are here, and making sure in some ways that those skills marry or integrate with global opportunities?
Yeah, so I think the skill sets are there, and as you mentioned that government can be a good user of that. I actually think that this is giving a great I would say backward integration benefit of a significant degree. Today, thanks to we operating in this global environment, the governments are forced to bring in AI in schools. So today now the government is talking about that there should be a course on artificial intelligence for class 6, 7th or 8th. We possibly wouldn't have gotten that far had we not seen that global massive scale. So to me, we are getting a huge boost early start with the education system. We are also getting this because once you do something, you also expect the world to be that way. So I think if you look at it, I'm sure, I don't have statistics, but I'm sure India is one of those larger ones user of artificial intelligence itself. So the number of people who use Siri or Alexa and all of those kind of things, that ecosystem also grows, because when you build those kind of systems, you try and bring home too.
Right. So if I would ask you in a last question, in many ways, you're saying that the entire GCC universe has far more influence or punches way beyond its actual weight when it comes to influencing the sort of education, the socio-economic environment in a country like India, and that could really grow further.
Significantly true. I think there is a significant indirect benefit, upskilling, which can be used in domestic market and government, creating education thing, and I think the general upliftment of the society is also a big thing which is happening, because I think it does create a very different kind of working environment. I've seen some people, if you go back 20 years, they would possibly not even have the context. So and I think people who used to travel from India to overseas used to get much bigger culture shock, which they don't get anymore. So I think to me there are some subtle benefits of being global, and I think GCCs are playing a big part in that.
That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much, Akhilesh, for visiting us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.